Matthew Tree, when you first came to Catalonia in the end of the 70s, did you ever think that Catalonia could be one of the splinter off regions of Europe? Did you ever think that there could be a revolution of the smiles, as it's described, in this new place you were coming to live in?
I remember very clearly, it was a long time ago, that when I first came here, what amazed me was that nobody had told me about any of this, about the language, the culture, the literature, the history, the existence, the actual existence of Catalonia. And it occurred to me, even back then, when I knew absolutely nothing, that for that to have happened, for everybody to have been kept in total ignorance of the existence of all this, it means that Catalonia must have a strange, anomalous relationship with the rest of Spain. So therefore, I couldn't foresee what's happening now, but I knew that the situation couldn't stay the same, that something would have to change.
Mm-hmm. Would you say it's a more sociological or psychological even question, but would you say that the Catalan character lends itself to explaining what's going on? Are Catalans communicative about what they feel, what's going on, or are they rather reserved?
Well, I can't speak for all 7.5 million Catalans, but I notice that Catalans are absolutely fascinated whenever foreign people talk about Catalonia, which suggests to me that they're eager, or many of them are eager, to get information out about Catalonia. Definitely, I would say a majority.
You, as a successful TV personality, and a very well-known person in Catalonia, not only for your books, but also for your television appearances and radio appearances. Yeah. You've even had your own TV program.
Well, it pays the rent. Yeah.
It pays the rent sometimes. I'd like to ask you about a very particular thing that's happened in the last week or so, which is the viewing of the documentary Las Cloacas de Interior. What's your view about this and the fact that it hasn't appeared on Spanish televisions and until yesterday, I think it was on
Gol TV, yeah.
Gol TV,
football station. About that program, it reminded me of certain documentaries that have appeared in the UK on similar issues. There was one which Margaret Thatcher tried to ban in the 80s about the dirty tricks used by the British Army against the IRA, for example. Now those documentaries were seen, they were not only seen by the entire country or all the countries together, but they were broadcast by the BBC in the main, which is the national broadcaster. So in fact that program should have been broadcast in the same context by Spanish national television, for example. But I found it astonishing that it was only, I think, the Balearic public television, Catalan public television and Basque public television, and a private, if I'm not mistaken, a private sports TV station have been the only ones to broadcast it.
Associated with the very producers, Media Pro.
Ah, right, okay.
Gol TV. Would anything like this be comparable in England? I mean, the fact that an extremely serious allegation is being made against a government, and yet for even leading Catalan socialist MPs and leaders announcing publicly that they have no intention of watching the programme. Could you compare that with anything that's occurred in England?
No, I just find that extraordinary. And in the tweeted words of an American friend of mine, when they interviewed the leader of the Catalan Socialist Party, and they said, did you watch Cloacas de Interior? And he said, no, I forget what it was, the film that was on the other channel. And my Goldfinger. No, I watched Goldfinger. My American friend just said, I switched off. Right. You know.
Mm-hmm. Again, as a communicator, what could we tell Catalan viewers about the way that the Catalan process is perceived by the British public on the British media?
There's a big difference between people in Britain who are informed of what's going on, either because they're politicians and they're interested in the question. There's a as you know, there's a cross-party sort of group that meets every now and then to talk about Catalonia, or they're people who are informed directly by people living in Catalonia. Now, if you look at those people, and I'm thinking in particular of two friends of mine who know the Catalan situation perfectly, because I've gone on about it so much, but they are absolutely astonished at what's happening. They cannot believe that the Spanish government has refused to even sit down at the same table with the Catalan government and talk about this. But recently, very recently, I went to England and met a whole group of people who I haven't been in contact with very much, and they just really still know very little about it. Even the fact that there's going to be a referendum on the 1st of October, they went, really? 1st of October? That's quite soon, isn't it? You know, they weren't informed.
Well, we've mentioned the referendum. How could we explain to these people that you know, or to an English audience in general, the controversy there is over the fact that the Spanish government does not want to allow the referendum to be carried out? How could we explain this controversy?
Well, I think the key figure to mention, which is a correct figure, is that 80% of the Catalan population, whether they are in favour of or against independence, or think independence is necessary or not, 80% of Catalans want a referendum. And the Spanish government has refused even to negotiate a referendum after 18 attempts by the Catalan government to set up those negotiations. And if you want, in the British case, you can make the comparison with Scotland. Immediately the British government said yes, and then offered them all the tea in China, so to speak, so that they would vote no. But that was the way of doing it, whereas here it's just, first of all, the Spanish government pretended this was never happening. When it realised it actually was happening quite recently, they suddenly became very aggressive very quickly. I mean, this is just something, you know, it's quite extraordinary, exceptional.
It's probably difficult to go into it in detail, but, you know, one recent TV or one recent program has spoken about the fact that about 50% of people opposing the referendum from the Spanish side do so for identity reasons, whereas only 13% of those in favour of the referendum and in favour of voting yes do so for the same reason, identity reasons. What, in a nutshell, what could you say, what do you see as being the key reasons for Catalans wanting to vote?
Oh, from talking to people over the last 5 years, there's a whole bunch of reasons. But I think one of the important ones was the fact that a legal voted statute of autonomy was rejected in a very disdainful way back in 2010. That changed a lot of people's minds because they wanted more autonomy. That's all they wanted, more autonomy within Spain, a Basque deal within Spain. Most Catalans would have been more than happy with that in 2010. But when they saw that even that was not possible, despite having full democratic backup, that's when the pro-independence thing changed. So I think it's people stopping being federalists and becoming independent, pro-independence, that's been one of the reasons. And behind that, there's a whole mix of things, of language, of money, of atrocious administration by the Spanish government in terms of public transport, for example, to name just one. There's a whole series of factors, and the surveys, in fact, show that most Catalans have a mix of reasons why they want independence.
What are your feelings about the treatment of the historical memory, and what would you say about the fact that the Catalan Parliament have effectively annulled the death and prison sentences of the Francoist regime, and have done so unilaterally? In other words, they've just annulled them without bearing in mind the position of the Spanish legal situation, and yet in the Parliament, the Spanish parties have also voted in favour. What do you make of that?
Well, it's something, better late than never. It should have been done a long time ago, but it's only now that the Catalan government seems to have the self-confidence to start doing this kind of thing. And in fact, when you scratch the surface a little bit, you'll find that even right-wing unionist, pro-Spanish politicians in Catalonia on this issue, the issue of redressing these wrongs, more or less are on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, we're here in Banyoles, a beautiful city in the north of Catalonia, and the Catalan president is from a town not too far away from here. To finish off this interview, because we don't have too much time, I'd like to ask you about what your opinion is of President Puigdemont, who perhaps 2-3 years ago was a relatively unknown figure. Well, what's your opinion of him? And maybe I would ask you about Junqueras as well. Are the Catalans who are in favour of independence, are they in good hands?
Well, I have to be careful here because I've known Carles Puigdemont for over 15 years, because when he was a journalist, I worked for the magazine that he founded, Catalunya Today. I also worked for the Catalan Cultural Centre in Girona, of which he was, at the time, he was the director. But I've been watching him, obviously, very closely since he's been the president of Catalonia. I've talked to a lot of people about him, people with very different views on independence, and everybody is in agreement that he's just one of these, there must be a word in sociology for that, but he's one of these people who sort of gets on the right side of everybody, because he talks to people and he's able to shake hands with people who have completely opposing views, and he's able to talk with them. I'm not talking about the parliamentary debates, I'm talking more about what he does outside the parliament. He will meet and talk with these people. He doesn't slam a door on anybody. And as for Junqueras, I met him long before he became the vice president, and what's amazing about him is that he is just an incredibly intelligent historian. I've asked him about, I won't go into the details, but he has probably a photographic memory, because my experiences of him talking about tiny little details of European and Catalan history, and he has all this knowledge at his fingertips. So if he's the man who's the vice president and Puigdemont is the man who's the president, and they come from different parties with different views, I think I couldn't be happier, actually. I think they are the two right people in the right place at the right time.
One last question. Today, 23rd of July, we've heard the news that President Puigdemont has announced to Le Figaro, a French newspaper, that if he is to be suspended by the Constitutional Court of Madrid, he will not take any notice, and he will continue to be president of the Catalans. So this is very much fighting talk. How do you think international politics, international forum might interpret this particular quote?
Again, it depends on how much information they've got, because the Constitutional Court in Spain has lost a great deal of its legitimacy, because it seems to be almost remote controlled by the politicians who are currently in power in Madrid. They say something, the Constitutional Court does it. You know, this is not a serious judicial court. But the other thing maybe to bear in mind is that internationally, the Spanish Civil War is still very much present in people's minds. It's something that's been talked a great deal since it finished well over 70, 80 years ago. And it's something that internationally people would be very wary of any kind of conflict in Spain starting up again. So in that sense, the warnings would be going out to Madrid. Do not get nasty. Don't do anything bad. Because it's something that's still, very much present.
And yet we've had in this last week the Spanish police, the Guardia Civil, entering the parliament with masked faces and giving a tremendously sinister attitude, and also entering the Catalan National Theatre. So obviously the times are pretty dramatic at this particular moment.
The interesting thing about them entering the parliament and other Catalan institutional buildings was that the Catalan police, who were on guard there, they obviously had a protocol already set up for dealing with this kind of situation. And the protocol was to keep the paramilitary police, which is in effect what the Guardia Civil are, to keep them in a waiting room, to disarm them, to make sure they identify themselves correctly, and for the Catalan police to get the material that the Guardia Civil were looking for. Now that, to me, is quite interesting, because there has been a standoff, our first standoff between a Spanish police force and a Catalan police force. I would say the Catalan police force won the standoff.
Right. Okay, Matthew, thanks very much for
Thank you.
this interview.